So let's discuss the end of World War I. By the time 1918 rolls around, most of the countries that are involved are tired enough that they want to develop a plan for what can be done to actually end the conflict, and what resolutions can be made to try to prevent such a conflict from returning in the future. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that this does not work. Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, emerges as one of the most significant planners of this post-war world. All right? He is known for the establishment of his 14 points, 14 different provisions to first end the war, as well as maintain peace along what he thought were liberal and democratic lines. All right, I don't have all 14 points written down here, but in general, the things that he is promoting, one of the most important ones is independence or self-determination of so many countries that ultimately were experiencing oppression prior to the First World War. I think particularly of the Balkan region here, where you saw all these different areas trying to have influence, control over Balkan regions. Think about Austria, attempting to annex parts of the Balkans. Think about, ultimately think about why the inability for some of these larger countries to allow these minority groups establish their own governments would, of course, lead to a lot of dissatisfaction and potential conflict. Also, figuring out how colonialism can continue, if at all. All right, so adjusting colonial claims. The idea behind this was to make sure that both the colonizers themselves, as well as the native peoples, would have their interests served in the game of colonialism. Kind of a difficult goal. They also wanted the Germans to evacuate Russia, right? So get away from that peace treaty. They wanted Alsace-Lorraine to go back to France. They wanted to restore the Balkans, right? So there's a provision there. Oh, and also give Schleswig back to Denmark. Germany, a lot of keeping Germany in check, establishing that balance of power in Europe. They wanted the Balkans, again, to have autonomy in their region. And one of the most significant points is the 14th. Right, where he wanted to establish an international organization to supply collective security, and that was called the League of Nations. We'll return to that in a little while. All right, so how does the war actually end? There's one final offensive in the spring of 1918 called the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. All right, and this is where the Germans after they win against Russia, they shift all of their military attention to the Western Front. All right, and so they get together this massive offensive against the Allies. All right, attempting to conquer them once and for all. So they're still kind of excited about their victories against Russia. However, at this point, the U.S. had entered the war. All right, just in time, I might add. So they enter the war to assist Britain and France and stop the German offensive because the U.S. soldiers were fresh, not war-weary. The entry of these 140,000 fresh U.S. soldiers helped the Allies score a victory. All right, and the Central Powers, after this offensive fails, want the 14 points to be supported because Austria, Hungary, and Germany feel as though the 14 points are going to give them fairer treatment. All right, so the surrenders. November 3rd, Austria surrenders, and Germany surrenders on November 11th. And also this is because there's a lot of anti-war revolution taking place within both of these countries, so they know that war needs to end. All right, so negotiating peace. All right, this happens in Paris. The 4 major countries that are involved are Britain, France, the U.S., and Italy. All right, so we have an image of this so-called Big Four here. All right, this is the Prime Minister of England, Lloyd George. This is the Emperor or the King of Italy, right, Orlando. This is the Prime Minister of France, Georges Clemenceau, and this is the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson. Notice who's not included: Germany. All right, so a very prominent player in the First World War does not actually get a place on the negotiating table. Russia did not attend on its own decision because it was so plagued with its own internal conflict. And Italy, even though they first participated in the conference, end up leaving prematurely because they're mad because they don't get some of the territories that they sought in 1915. All right, so the peace conference ultimately results in the Versailles Treaty, and there are a number of parts of it, but there's some that are more important than others. First, in terms of colonialism, we start to see the Central Powers, Germany in particular, losing so many of their colonial possessions. All right, so these mandates for former colonies are enacted, right? Basically making it so that these former Central Power colonies are no longer going to be occupied, no longer going to be ruled by these Central Power countries. All right, so former German colonies are going to be given kind of dispersed to France, Britain, and Japan. You're also going to see Britain and France, that is, control much of the Middle East. All right, so also the Ottomans, their influence is no longer going to be in those areas in Africa, right, or the Arab areas. But the Versailles Treaty ensures that Germany does not lose very much territory in Europe. Okay, so their idea is to prevent too much backlash from the Germans. Even more importantly, and one of the major reasons why World War II happens, is the War Guilt Clause, or Article 231 of the Versailles Treaty. What this does is it places sole blame for the war on Germany, and it promises to severely punish Germany for this. Right, Germany is forced to pay a huge $33 billion reparation or indemnity to Britain and France, something that took them until relatively recently to pay off. It significantly reduces the German army and navy. It demilitarizes the Rhineland, and it takes over some coal mines that were occupied by Germany, gives them to France, all right? And Germany loses all of its colonies. Also, the Versailles Treaty establishes the League of Nations. All right, again, it's an international organization. It's kind of like the precursor to the UN, trying to avoid future wars, right? Make sure that all these member states protect one another. Again, Germany and Russia are not included in the League of Nations. Who else is not included? By their own choice, the United States. Even though this was Wilson's plan, the U.S. Senate wants to make amendments to the 14 points, and Wilson was steadfastly against any changes to his plan. He was very stubborn. He was very passionate about the 14 points. He actually had a stroke while he was touring the country trying to promote them. Because the U.S. never ratifies the 14 points, they do not get involved in the League of Nations, and this results in U.S. isolationism after the First World War. They also refused to ratify treaties forging an alliance with Britain and France. So ultimately, the U.S. Rejects the Versailles Treaty. So that's significant. Right, so we see that the Versailles Treaty was very harsh towards Germany, but arguably, they said that they didn't really have an alternative, right, because peace was needed, and peace was needed quickly. They needed to lift that naval blockade because so many Germans were starving that the ultimate results would have been worse if they didn't negotiate peace terms sooner. All right, so what are we left with after World War I ends? All right, one of the biggest impacts, something that is going to lead into the age of anxiety next, is the casualty rate. Okay, 10 million soldiers killed, and a further 10 million civilians dead. All right, this isn't just because of bombings like the Zeppelins. Also, there's a massive influenza epidemic in 1918, which takes out a significant amount of the young population, actually, people in their 20s. All right, so again, that contributes to the term lost generation, right? All these people who were sort of in the prime of their lives, in their 20s, die off because of the First World War. All right, you're going to have 15 million more die in the Russian Revolution. Also, because this lost generation, they're also in their childbearing years, so you're going to see that the birth rates of all these European countries is also going to decline. All right, good things about the war. Because of the introduction of so many new jobs, you're going to see some increased social equality. All right, so the class distinctions between the rich and the poor are going to become a little bit more blurry. That happens in particular in Russia. The Russian Revolution abolishes the nobility. Women get more rights, actually than any other country in Europe for a time. Throughout the countries involved in the First World War, women get the right to vote. It's a gradual process. So you have women get the right to vote in the United States, Britain, Germany. You're also going to see the nobility in general lose a lot of their influence and prestige. So in the Central Power, well, in Central Power countries, Germany and Austria, the nobility is going to lose a lot of its status, and also the nobility in Russia, of course, because of the Bolshevik Revolution. All right, and again, women also get a window into what it is like to receive a little bit more equal status to men because they get so many job opportunities. However, their efforts to have equal pay were short-lived. Also, you're going to see kind of one of the other reasons why, another impact of the war, or another contribution to the end, is that dissent really increased as the war kept going. All right, remember again the Russian Revolution. The Russian Tsar is going to be overthrown, of course, during the revolution, right? And the provisional government replaced him. Then you have the Bolsheviks take the place of the provisional government. So lots of chaos in Russia. Remember, dissent in Britain takes form through the Easter Rebellion in 1916. You have anti-revolutionary activity in Germany as well. All right. You're also going to have lots of women get involved against the war, particularly in France, Austria, and Italy. Right? They want their working conditions to improve, so you see a lot of involvement with women as well. You're also going to see, since there was government censorship in almost every country, that there are going to be a lot of people that just generally feel like their government is not really being genuine with the population, and so there's going to be a lot of dissent as the war keeps going. One of the also significant impacts of the war is that so many of these long-standing political dynasties that had existed for hundreds of years are going to collapse. The Habsburg dynasty had been around for 500 years. Habsburg dynasty is gone. The Romanov dynasty in Russia, 300 years, gone. Hohenzollern dynasty in Germany, 300 years, gone. And the Ottoman Empire, which had lasted for 500 years, is gone. We also see the redrawing of the European map, all right? So many countries in the Balkan region, which, clearly there was a lot of sort of difficulty leading into the First World War about what the Balkan region would look like as the Ottoman Empire declined. But here you see the newly drawn map of Europe. Note the creation of Yugoslavia that comprises Serbia and a great part of the shrinking Austrian Empire here. So you see Austria and Hungary are now separated. Also the creation of Czechoslovakia. All right, Hungary is new. Also, some of these states to the north here, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, are going to be new. There's also going to be this interesting divide between East Prussia and Germany with the creation of Poland. So the Polish corridor is going to split up Germany. All right. The Russian Revolution, of course, that's significant to the impact of the war because it results in the first communist country. One of the really significant legacies that we're going to continue to return to is that the Germans, of course, were really upset with the Versailles Treaty, and so this is going to contribute to a lot of anger with the treaty, and it's going to be partially responsible for the rise of Hitler in the 1930s. You're also going to see the U.S. emerge as the most significant financial power in the world. All right. So you're going to see that the U.S. is going to become the chief creditor in the world, and Europe is going to sort of lose its preeminent position economically. All right. And one of the reasons why this is because the U.S. enters the war so late and experiences far less casualties. Okay, unresolved problems, of course, are going to be what leads to World War II, which we're, of course, going to talk about much more when we get to World War II. But it's interesting that John Maynard Keynes in 1919, he wrote a book about the economic consequences of the Versailles Treaty, and he predicted that because the Versailles Treaty was so harsh towards Germany, there would be lots of political unrest in the future. And when Hitler took control of Germany in 1933, what Keynes predicted in his book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, were basically prophetic. So even though we're finished with World War I now, by all means, we're not finished with the chaos that continues later on in the 20th century. So we'll pick up with the Age of Anxiety, this post-war sort of depressed period, unsure of what to do, and then we'll proceed on to World War II.